Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight. Thanks for Homer Soil and Water and to Emily from NRCS to invite me here. It's been kind of a long road and it's fun to be able to share all of the work and all the excitement with everyone. So we started our farm here in Ninilchik in 2015. We started with just a really raw piece of land. We didn't have access to it, all sorts of different hurdles that we overcame. But we wanted a place that we could have for a really long time. We wanted a place that we could always come back to, and we were excited to look at all of the subsistence parts of Ninilchik. When we started, we had little kids. Adeline, my oldest, who's now off at college, she was just 8 years old when we started, and Anna was 4 and Kate was 6, and it was quite the adventure to come down to Ninilchik. We lived up in Sterling and to start our farm with just a really raw piece of land. So when we were searching out land, we were looking for something that had a nice southern slope to it, something that was pretty flat and manageable. We were looking for good draining soil. And we found it here in Ninilchik on 10 acres originally. We had a decent kind of soil with it, silty loam, some clay parts of it, some sand parts of it. But the basis of it, having gravel underneath, was very desirable for us. Our first year, we looked into a lot with NRCS and all of the offerings that they have as far as educational things and their grants. We visited different farms throughout and probably wouldn't be where we are today without the help of many people. Scenic Place Peonies, they were awesome to us. Our local AK Flower Girls, they're pretty awesome too. So we were able to get lots of information about peonies and about soil and starting our little farm. So when we first started out, we just had a forest. This had never been logged before. We came in and kind of looked at the area that was just the most open to kind of start with. I really wasn't excited about taking down a bunch of trees. In hindsight, I should have been maybe a little bit more aggressive about that, but we started with just an excavator, small excavator, and tried to pop the roots without disturbing the soil too much. But as you can see, it's a lot of work no matter how you cut it. We stacked all those stumps, let the soil, slowly kind of drip off of them, and then we re-spread that out so that we didn't lose any topsoil. It definitely is a work-intensive approach, but it seems to be working well for us because our soil is pretty nice now. We originally cover cropped with annual rye and field peas, some red clover, just to bring some nutrients to the ground. Clover was kind of hard just because it wasn't balanced right acidity wise just yet, but it did take a little bit. We did kind of blanketly try to bring the pH up to a normal level because, as we all know, our pH is pretty acidic here. So you can kind of see the kids were pretty little at this point, but they just loved getting dirty and getting their hands in the soil. They helped us pick sticks. We used to pay them in ice cream. Our general store here in Ninilchik was pretty awesome for those things. But yeah, we would come down kind of weekend warriors because we still had our day jobs to do in Sterling and our main home, but lots and lots of very dirty, muddy weekends with the kids. Here you can see our fun little campsite. This is how our first summer was spent, is in this tent. We'd catch water and such to deal with fire management and cooking and all that kind of stuff. But meanwhile, at home, we were peeling logs and getting ready for putting up a cabin. So lots of people ask us this, just why would you go through the trouble? Why would you do something like this? And some days we sit out at the farm, we're like, why did we do this? It's very questionable at times, but we really wanted something for our kids. We wanted something that they would know where their food came from. they would always be able to come back, they'd have good memories. It's pretty exciting. It was really fun to go back and see all these pictures, because now this guy is like 6 foot and they grow up pretty fast. But I think it's taught our kids a lot of lessons about just working hard and working for what you want, and how you'll be connected to something when you put the time into it. So you can see here, we didn't really have a road into the property at all. You'll see that on my last slide. This is one of our regrets. We should have done that first, but this is kind of what it looked like as we were putting kind of some seed out just to start stabilizing the soil. This is somewhat picked over. We live right by the Ninilchik River, which is awesome. It's a great place to get all the mud off the kids after long days at the farm. We always balanced, you know, our foraging, some subsistence, some beach fun. Here's the kids out, we're just picking blueberries up in the hills, and it was a pretty great childhood, I think. This is what the cabin looked like stacked up in our at our Sterling home. That was actually in process before we even bought our 10 acres. So luckily for us, it was ready to put up in one of our first years of the farm. 2016 was a really big year for us. We set that cabin so that we had kind of a dry place to be and cook food and that kind of stuff with the kids. This was a day that, for a weekend, that my husband took the little guy up there because they built me stairs for a Mother's Day gift, and pretty fun overall weekend. But you can see that this kind of shows some of our first high tunnel that went up in 2016. Quite a process, but I would say overall it went really smooth for us. So we worked with NRCS through the EQUIP program for that grant. They were great. It's super intimidating to start with, or it was for me. Never done anything government-wise before. Definitely seemed like a lot of paperwork. But when you look back on it and you understand the process, it really was actually quite simple. And there's so many people that are versed in it and can help now that it's pretty streamlined, I would say. But we put up a bat house that was kind of part of that program. This high tunnel is 30 by 72. We purchased our high tunnel through Oregon Valley. We just wanted something that was a little bit more a higher gauge metal, beefier, would withstand the snow load. It's not the direction that everybody goes, but it's been successful for us, and we haven't had any snow issues. But we did use the excavator to kind of set those big ribs and beams. But otherwise it was pretty much by hand. We also participated in the nutrient management program for EQUIP and crop rotation. Those were great with just kind of getting our soil balanced in the beginning, because it takes a lot to take just virgin ground from Alaska and make it into something where you can actually grow food and produce, because we have such new soil. The kids along the way obviously learned great skills. We were able to really pretty much provide for ourselves when we were at the farm in the summertime. This is my little guy who's now like 6'3", and he used to use this BB gun out on the property, and that was pretty fun to see the kids successful. But our first year of produce went pretty smooth, because it took at least a month into our high tunnel that we didn't have any water at the property. So that was a little bit of a challenge, and we hauled water, and I do think it was helpful for our soil to take just local water as well. But we did get a well drilled, and life got a lot easier. But winter time, we made our little cabin livable and got it chinked and insulated and ready for that next season. But winter's a great time, and we still use winter just to kind of plan what's next. Like, what are we going to do next summer? What are we going to make better? And how are we going to develop our fields? And that winter, we were ready to diversify and just make sure that we were not too focused on one crop. So peony planting, we were able to get our roots in the fall of 2016. So we'd only owned the farm for like a year and a half or so. And we took the time, those fields pretty much just got the one cover crop season, but mounded and made sure all of our drainage was right. We type hard those fields, just getting ready for our roots to be ready. And we planted fall of 16. Always looking at drainage. That's probably the most important thing with our peonies. Spacings and what species we were going to use. We did definitely kind of chat with a lot of the farms around to kind of see what they were successful with. All of our varieties have been successful. Our corals were a little wimpy to start with, but they're really coming to full maturity. They look great. So this is spring after that fall planting, and you'll see that there's just a few little sprigs up of each root, but we were pretty happy. Almost everything came up, everything looked pretty good that year. Our high tunnel was in full bore, and we started to build a fence together. If anybody's worked with their family on building a fence, you will know that it's free therapy for all, but it's definitely a challenging activity. The whole family was a part of it, and not something I desire to do again, but it's really great that the farm was protected. So as you can see, you know, the peonies definitely every year we get, you know, probably 20 to 30% more stems coming up. These are definitely not in 2018 because we debudded for most of the first 3 years, which means that we took off all of the buds. My husband and I are both have a science background in the medical field, and when people tell us to do something, you know, it's just kind of, we just follow it. So we were told that you take off every single bud for the first few years, and that's what we did. And then years later, we determined that a lot of people just at least would let a flower bloom from time to time. Didn't follow that as type A as we did, but we did that to preserve the energy and to put it back down into the roots, and I think it has paid off for us, but just to be patient. When we originally started, we kind of planned on 5 years for a harvest. That seemed like that changed the tune of farmers. They decided that, you know, 3 years you'd have enough sustainability to harvest a little bit and start selling. There is something coming.
We might just have to click on the slideshow again.
Just a second. Okay. So the same time that we hilled for the peony fields, which are kind of in that backdrop, you can see the type are down. We also put in a field of red raspberries and a field of golden raspberries. In hindsight, we now have typer on all of this. It became just too much to manage and weed, but that's where we started. So yes, children are destructive, and it was always kind of fun to have them at the farm because you take 2 steps forward and a few steps back. But in general, our biggest destruction is moose, porcupines, and rabbits. The fence went up. The moose sat there on guard here and kind of watched us that first season, like, who took over our land and why are you there? But it was fun to be able to see them kind of in their natural habitat all the time too. But it's definitely kind of a consistent war. Our fence was a start of 6 feet, and then we had another round of barbed wire, which brought us up to like 7, 8 feet. Since then, we put in electric fence kind of at nose height for those moose. We still have moose in our field. We've had some this last winter. I think it's a young guy, but they definitely just see it as a suggestion, so build a really sturdy fence if you decide to farm. And build it soon. The kids keep growing in all their skills. The kids were able to split firewood, especially my middle child, at probably about 6 or 7 years old. Pretty talented in general with just being able to take care of themselves. So 2019, we had kind of a nominal stem harvest. It would be about our 3rd year, and it was really exciting. When you wait for something for so long and you put so much time into it, it's just definitely rewarding to be able to kind of take those first steps. And this is obviously a staged photo. I don't necessarily always look that put together out on the farm, but it was pretty exciting just to make those first few cuts and just know that we were headed in the right direction. But these are red charms, probably my favorite of all peonies. And it looks like some Duchess with them. We did start tours that year. Which we do annually, but it does just happen for a short window. So a lot of people miss it. We do post it on our Facebook page, but we just do it after post-harvest, and it's always kind of a interesting time. With our nominal kind of harvest, we were also just trying to take shorter stems as well, and we decided to have a booth at Salmon Fest that year. Definitely a blast. It was fun to meet a lot of people, fun to spread the love of farming and the flowers and to see how excited people were over them. But we made flower crowns and decorated people's hats and belts, and it was quite the hit. But a great use of the shorter stems just to leave most of the foliage on the plant and help them in their young stage of life. But definitely a lot of work. I don't envy those that do Salmon Fest every year. It's a lot of energy to bring to the table, but pretty rewarding process. So COVID hit, and it definitely brought some significant meaning to what we were doing at our farm. Our whole purpose of just being able to provide for our community, provide for our family, have something really sustainable that would be there for years and years. It definitely came full circle when people were looking for lettuce in the grocery store, and people didn't necessarily have much of a plan of how they could provide for themselves. We felt pretty secure in this, and it brought us closer to the farm. We always were pretty much seasonal here. We would come in the summertime with the kids, back and forth from our jobs, working out of town. But with kind of COVID and homeschooling and all that happened, it really just brought us back to what really mattered. And our farm, we made the big move and decided that we would be at the farm full time. We purchased a house next to our farm because our farm is an off-grid farm and we don't have electricity up there. But for the peony cooler and other things that we needed, it was best to have power, and our adjacent neighbors had that. So that worked out pretty well for us. This is my youngest son, Andon, here. He's now 14. So at this point, we were pretty established. We had our cabin pretty well set. You could cook meals in there. We had lots of sleeping area for the kids, and yes, we got to homeschool again. We never really thought that we'd have the kids home as much as we did, but they make for really great workers in the fall when you have lots and lots to pick. So these are the golden raspberries. I don't know how well you can see that, but they were definitely loaded that year, and pretty exciting to see. I thought this was maybe a good overview of what the farm is. It's maybe a little bit nauseating, but my son took a drone of the farm. So you can see kind of where our cabin is. The road we had put in, both high tunnels. Those are our warming tanks for our water system down in those black tanks. So these first few fields that are looking kind of sparse, oh, it paused nicely for everybody, good. Those fields have been changed over once already, because something didn't work so well there, but you can see the 2 peony fields. The more fuller fields like that, those are the 2 raspberry fields, and off to the side is a rhubarb field that was started. And I'm not sure that it's going to play through because it looks like it doesn't like our internet, which is fine. We can skip it. You guys get the gist, but then you can see the other homestead that where we have power. I think I can see it.
We wanted to go the next one.
Thank goodness for Monica here. This is my first time using Google Slides, but it was it's fairly easy to create, so.
Is that right?
That's right. Cool. So this was a big change for the farm. Before we had the irrigation system, we would hand water. And we did have a good portion of what you see here in when we were creating our system for irrigation. So we would haul hoses around and we literally would go like 5 seconds per peony hole and just water through. And obviously the high tunnels, no matter what, you needed to water those. And if any of you guys remember this, those were a little bit warmer years than what we've had in the last couple of years. And so there was just absolutely no way that we were keeping up with the needs of the plants. We worked with NRCS for our irrigation system, and I believe we were the first in the state. I know Scenic Place Peonies, we were working kind of hand in hand with that because they were putting in their system as well during this time. And it was new for our state to deal with, but everybody has a little bit different needs for irrigation. And with our farm, we needed something where our drip system was going to push out more water per minute, second than other drip systems. It's not a gravity fed system. We run it through our generator. So we just wanted to kind of have the least amount of energy used to water our plants. So our irrigation has bigger drip holes than others, but as you can see here, I have several different zones where I can take and close off different areas that I don't need to water. Originally, we kind of had the 4 zones, and if you look up above zone 1 on the fence line, we keep our manifold up there. That just helps me kind of regulate how many gallons I'm watering at a time. And the different valves to each system. But since then, I have had Brian put valves all throughout my high tunnels and the berry fields, which are way up kind of by that in that zone 1, because if I'm watering the vegetable high tunnel, I don't necessarily need to be watering my perennial trees every single time that I would put. So totally different water needs. But now we have valve systems where I can shut things off if when I need to. But this was totally appreciated. A bit of extra work. We did have some seriously muddy weekends with the kids, but if you look where the yellow goes, I don't know, can they see me point? Maybe? No?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you kind of go the length of this, we dug trenches and there's piping all down that. And when Brian was doing that and the kids were helping out, you're down into that clay area, and we had this torrential downpour of water. And so the kids just thought it was amazing because it was just the biggest mud pit that they could run through. And when we put in the irrigation, we did not have the house with running water at that time. So lots of laundry. But with water comes production. We saw fine production prior to that. I don't think hand watering, we really ever got down deep into the roots. We had a lot of very small beets, very, very small carrots, just not what you need at a farm. So we definitely, it was a big game changer with having enough water for all plants and being able to monitor it. We use tensiometers throughout the fields, recorded data for NRCS and then use that data so that we aren't overwatering. We have had the fortunate experience to work with several local brides here. I usually take on a couple local brides every year. We usually keep things pretty small from our little farm. We have about 1,000 peony roots, but this was a lovely wedding that I got to help with some table arrangements and take part in. These are pictures from Megan Friedman, their photographer. This is a local artist, Whitney Schollenberg. She came out to the farm with some seniors to take pictures and just enjoy all of the beauty. I think she did a wonderful job. It's always fun to see everything, you know, with people dressed up and flowers at the same time. Because usually at the farm, it's just us dirty and sweaty and not quite as picturesque. But this is the vegetable high tunnel. It was the second high tunnel that we put in. I currently run 2 high tunnels, one that's more perennial based with our fruit trees. This would be our vegetable high tunnel. You can see little bits down here in this corner, the blue drip irrigation. But this is probably, this picture I would guess is taken like late June, early July. And so sometimes people come into the high tunnel and they're like, why didn't you plant everything closer together? We do plant things pretty close within the rows, but we wanted access so that we could actually harvest and, you know, take a wheelbarrow and get rid of plants in the fall. And when you go into the high tunnels at the end of the season and in September, it's crowded. It's hard not to step on plants. So it's nice to have some room just to work between everything. I like to plant varieties. I like to plant a variety of each thing that we do. So even if it's just broccoli, I try to plant different species, just diversify. We've had great success with multiple varieties. I think that there's positive and negatives to many of the types that we've grown. We love this purple cauliflower. It's beautiful in a fresh plate of vegetables. It's fun to have. Now we plant like rainbow carrots. We did that with kids, just because it's super fun. This was a mother load of potatoes. It's always fun when you pull up one plant and you get to see that many in one spot. So pretty great. We have a small section of asparagus that I would love to expand, but just trying to move to more perennial based kind of vegetables, decrease kind of the overall workload for myself and fam. This is kind of one of these goofy things. Somebody was saying, oh gosh, why don't you guys start a YouTube channel? And so I decided to record myself one day and for whatever reason, we thought it was pretty funny to watch, but it definitely looks productive when you see it in fast forward. So I don't know if I have a YouTube career or not, but we felt like this was pretty funny, but that's what it looks like in the fall in the perennial high tunnel. So fruit wise, we have quite a few different varieties of fruits. We had our raspberry fields that you saw before. We have a rhubarb field that I've propagated from some long-standing rhubarb that was, or we got from a friend in Sterling. I've propagated half the field in that, and then some that we got from out East End Road. More and more I try to just take local things and propagate them into more plants because they seem to do better. But in this picture, you can kind of see we have our sour cherry tree. I think that's a Carmen Jewel, our black currants and gooseberries. Down the rows, if you saw that picture with the two high tunnels, we have a row of gooseberries that spans all the way down both high tunnels and in that center section, as well as currants that go all the way down on both sides now. Just some fun, pretty pictures. We don't grow a lot of the red currants. They're definitely prettier. They're just not as sweet. But I still have a 70-foot row of reds. Some strawberries up in the corner. Those are off of our plum tree, just some plums that are on the process of ripening. And then our joke is when you pick the last berry that you found the one you were looking for. So that's my goofy picture that I'm finally done picking currants for the year. Every year we offer farmers bundles. We pretty much sell most of our peonies locally, or we sell to the other local farm here in town in bulk. But I enjoy the one-on-one with just kind of conversing with people that own lodges here and restaurants, and it's just a little bit more rewarding for me versus shipping lots off. But I think it's awesome that our peonies here in Alaska are shipped all over the United States and everybody gets to enjoy them. Nanilchik is, I feel like, probably the latest. I think there is Diamond Ridge peonies that's really close to our time frame, but we are pretty late in the fall, and so you can get peonies into September, which is awesome. These are just my ultimate favorites. This is Gracie. She got to hold the biggest red charm that we have. It's closed form, so when we pick them, every flower is a little bit different, but the reds we pick just very lightly soft and marshmallowy. But that flower open would be probably 10 inches-ish. So we did not sell that flower. We kept that flower because for whatever reason, I have one plant that just grows these enormous red charms, and they're just truly my favorite. But the grouping with me in that picture, that's exactly how we would pick them for putting into the cooler. This just shows a multitude of our varieties. This is the other neighboring farm here in town. They came to pick up just massive amounts of stems. We don't do it this way anymore. This was back in the beginning of our process. Now we have a much better, more streamlined process that keeps the flowers a little bit more protected. But you can see on the other side, we have our coral charms, our Duchess, our Sarah Bernhardts, some red charms in there. I'm sure there's a bowl of cream hidden somewhere in there, but oh yeah, at the bottom. So local tours, it's always kind of funny because somebody always says, oh, well, that's what a carrot looks like. And so it's good to just kind of see that everybody has a beginning in agriculture somewhere, and sometimes it's just figuring out what a carrot is. But we meet people from all over the place, people who they came up to go fishing and they come out to the farm and just take lots of pictures. I'm usually dressed up a little bit for tours, but this really is just our neighbors. Great people, our local bee farmer that now has bees at our farm. But to me, this picture, as I remember it, they came during peony season because I was overwhelmed with work, and they came and took a bunch of leafy greens off my hands. So it's great to just work with your neighbors and build relationships and provide for a multitude of people. Georgia loves my red charms, so every single year she's my first bouquet of red charms. The fields in bloom are always really fun. So we harvest like 60 to 70% of the plant. It just depends on how marketable the buds are. And so when we're harvesting, there's really no color in the field. There are very nominal amounts of color in the field. They're just all in this nice tight closed bud formation. But then as we stopped harvesting off of one plant just to provide more foliage to renew those roots for next year, the buds that are on them, we let them bloom out. Some farmers will take those off just to give more energy into the plant, and because of botrytis and all these other things that the petals can cause issues with. We just watch it carefully. We don't have a huge field. It's pretty easy to manage, but this is when we bring people in for tours so they can pick kind of a field bouquet and just enjoy themselves, and it's a big photo op. But we do a little bit of education and make sure that everybody comes away with some knowledge of farming. But this is a picture from up at the kids' little fort, but you can see the fall where all the rhubarb is kind of died back and the leaves are starting to turn a little bit. The peony fields are still up. We don't usually cut those until pretty late in the season. But a nice evening just to enjoy kind of the fruits of your labor. This is a picture of our peony cooler. We definitely do not store our peonies like this anymore. That was a learning curve, but it was fine in the beginning. Now we have more production and we use bins and different ways just to keep the temperature from fluctuating too much. But we use a cool box system. We don't really have any moisture issues. We actually tend to run kind of dry, but that's easily fixable. So we'll store those stems for, 8 weeks potentially. And sometimes I've seen them last longer if need be, but I don't usually sell them much past that. And it's really nice to have everything cool and in the cooler, and your work kind of load is done. Then you're just moving on to marketing and selling. This is Cade looking really enthused. The end of the year, we all get together usually to clear the peony field. This happened to be, this year was just my boys and I, because my daughter's off at college, but we made short work of it. It was fine. But it's a lot of foliage to take down late in the season, but once that's done, it feels like kind of a relief, and it's kind of the beginning of your winter. You have your irrigation system shut down and the peonies are all cut off and moved off the field so they don't cause any sort of infection or disease. We have really tried to make sure that we spread the love of agriculture, and this year we were able to have kindergartners through 4th grade, 3rd grade, K through 3rd up at the farm. They came up in the spring when the snow was still there, and they planted potatoes and carrots, and it was just super fun. So when they got to pick potatoes at the end of the year, it was a lot of laughter, a lot of screaming, and a lot of imagination of what their potato looked like. So definitely seemed like it sat home for them. And Miss Keneally and Miss Z, they were awesome teachers, and the kids were just the easiest to have around. It looked a little destroyed afterwards, but it was just major harvesting all at once, just popping the tops of all the carrots, and lots of kids getting good and muddy. Of course, it was a torrential downpour that day as well, but we had both high tunnels. They were fine. So more recently, we purchased the 120 acres behind our farm, so adjoining to the farm, and started to create a trail system just for access so that we could access trees for firewood. We could access birch trees, especially for tapping. And we now have about 3 miles of trails back there, kind of give or take. And our latest grant was the forestry grant. So we're just working on kind of protecting different varieties, especially in an area that is very browsed by moose. And so this was the start. This last fall, we protected 100 trees with tubes, mainly birch trees this fall, but we will be branching out so that we diversify and protect multiple varieties, especially in this very open, willowy area that's been browsed hard. And the biggest hurdle with that was getting those tree tubes to Alaska. People wanted a lot of money to ship those to Alaska. So we did these in groups of 10, just trying to get kind of an area that would support each other. Those tree tubes, they do have some ventilation in them. We use stakes and they still look like they potentially are gonna be a really fun thing for the moose to kind of scratch their horns on. So we've had a couple that we've gotten to re-stake that were just really fun. I think they make a really cool noise when you hit them with your horns, so. So we have worked on research with wine, with kombucha, with bottling of syrups. We've worked on it for years. This has kind of always been a dream and a direction that we were hoping that we would go with things. And it's in process. We did get our initial approval by the state. But there's a lot of loopholes and a lot of things that we're working on. But we hope someday to be able to bring this to Ninilchik and the public. A multitude of beverages, including wines made from our produce at our farm. So with that, I'll leave you with, we love that we have winter at the farm and we take advantage of just all that it brings, just to renew our energy and get back to what we really love about farming. So. A few things we do different. The very first thing we would do different is we would build a solid road right at the get-go. We got stuck on the dirt so many times, it was pretty kind of astronomical. I don't know what took us so long to put in the gravel road. We did have a local gentleman put it in for us. They just basically flipped our dirt for gravel. It turned out pristine. Yeah, we definitely appreciate it more that we did it late because we spent so much time in the mud. I would definitely do a bigger perimeter of trees. We kind of battle trees falling on the fence line, just not quite having enough sunlight in certain areas. It was very hard for me to take down trees in the beginning. It still is kind of hard for me, but it just protects the investment that you've put into your land as well, and just make sure that everything gets the proper sunlight and heat that it needs. But it is nice that we have a pretty good wind break through the whole farm because we have a nice perimeter of mature trees. But there are probably a few more that need to come down. We, in hindsight, put typar down on other fields. We originally put typar down on our peony field because that was what was recommended at the time, and it's been great. I have no concerns over doing it. It definitely is a time saver. There's no way that we would have ever managed it without some typar, and I believe I've gotten typar for my birthday before, because I really love not weeding. We still weed plant, but building a shelter, and because it was off grid, if we would have built an outhouse a little bit earlier, I think that would have been pretty nice. Propagation versus purchasing. We purchased rhubarb in the very beginning. We put in several fields of it. It did not do well. I dug it all up. And since that time, we basically have just propagated our raspberries from other local sources, just things that are tried and true, much more successful. I gladly share clippings with people. I just think it's just the best way to go. It'll save you time in the long run. We're still in the process of building better gates. We have gates that just take a little bit more effort than they should when you're trying to get in and out and be productive. It's definitely high on our priority list. And then definitely, we were very fortunate to purchase this land before things got as expensive as they are. So, and maybe this is the cheapest land we'll ever be. I don't know, but we would definitely not be able to afford this type of property with today's prices. So I remember my parents talking about buying land when they were younger and wish they would have done it sooner. and wish they would have bought more. And I would just say that securing a place where you can kind of call home is just essential. So, all right. Well, I think I am open for questions.
Thanks, Tiffany. That was great. Okay, well, we have any questions in the room here?
I have a question.
yeah.
You have a question?
I always have questions.
Good.
How do you market your produce?
We don't market our produce very much. We don't really have to. We've sold locally in bulk, which is kind of great. So we've had
Okay.
people that have wanted, well, we've sold to restaurants locally here. And then like people that we know in town, that it makes it just easier, will come out to the farm and just pick our extra produce as far as vegetables go.
Okay.
Yes.
And you guys, I see, are you unmuted? Do you guys have any questions?
Anybody here in Homer have questions for
What
Tiffany?
do you do with all the rhubarb? You
That
can't
is
eat
our, so the rhubarb would be for future winemaking. Because we've propagated throughout the years, this last year was probably the first year that that entire field was full of rhubarb, so we've only harvested lightly. We've done all sorts of things with it, but wine is the only real reason why you would need that much rhubarb or to do syrups. It's a lot of rhubarb.
You got quite a few laughs out of the Homer crowd with your presentation today, just saying.
You're great.
Building a fence with a family.
Yeah.
Building a fence with the family is a unforgettable thing. Yeah, everybody should do it just once in their marriage. It's fun.
So I've got a quick question for you, and then we've got another one here, but so you were talking about these grants, and by that you meant the USDA NRCS's cost share programs where they like pay for your irrigation, pay for part of your high tunnel, all that kind of thing. Do you have any advice for people that have never done it before, that like want to get started with them, or like snags that you found you could have had an easier path, or was it just like super easy?
I would say for your any first contract, just find another farmer. I feel like everybody that we've ever talked to has been super generous about just being able to understand different parts of things. Chris up in the valley has helped me with some other things, and he's just really clear too about like, you should sign here and you should put an X on that box, which is helpful when you're overwhelmed. But most farmers that have been through the process, I think, would be pretty generous with helping you get started. Once you've had one grant, I guess it seems pretty straightforward to me. The rules kind of change, like between the first high tunnel that we put up to the second high tunnel. I mean, many things had changed. But I would say that nobody should be terribly intimidated by the process, and there's lots of ways to help you at NRCS.
We got one more live question here in the room in Homer, and then I see we've got a couple in the chat.
Yes, when you were finding your property, did NRCS help you like analyze the land before you purchased it, or is that something that you did by yourself?
That's something that we did by ourselves. We did kind of seek out different local, well, like Homer Soil and Water. We were up in the Sterling area, so we did kind of seek out some of those resources, like what should we be looking for? But just being an avid gardener prior to having a farm, I had some ideas of what we wanted. And then if you've ever built a tiered garden on a hillside, we just definitely knew we wanted something somewhat flat but draining. And I think we nailed it. It's pretty perfect for what we were looking for.
We're clear here for now.
Yeah, there's a couple questions in the Zoom chat.
Okay.
Thoughts on buying established peonies?
I'm not sure if we're talking about for a farm use or for just kind of personal use, I know that there are some peony fields, I think in Homer, that are so mature that they are either selling off varieties that they don't find as productive for mass sales or just didn't fit well for their farm. I definitely would seek out a local farmer if you were trying to purchase just a few for your garden versus going to a big box store, because you'll probably have a much better survival rate. I would think that most roots that you are purchasing from a local farmer are going to be significantly more mature than what you would get if you ordered roots. But we ordered through Rita Joe in Homer, and we had absolutely no issues with any of our roots.
Yeah, and she did clarify mostly personal use, but they would be plants from a local farmer, so.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a great option.
What's your preferred raspberry propagation method?
Digging up with a little bit of root. It's successful all the time. Raspberries are just so tough. Unfortunately, the two things that I never thought I'd have trouble growing, we did have trouble growing, which were the rhubarb plants that we purchased, which I would never recommend, and the raspberry plants that we purchased for our red raspberry field. So yearly, we probably could tackle more than one row a year, but it seems like that's the process that we're in. But we have been switching over the red raspberry field to a better variety that's local, but just digging a small amount of roots, and I've planted them in all different heat days, nights, sun, whatever, and they all seem to grow just fine. So little bits of roots, and it goes pretty well. I have tried clippings. I haven't been really successful with clippings. Maybe I'm not patient enough, but it sounded easier. Clippings for currants, gooseberries work awesome. I have no trouble with that.
What do you use year to year for fertilizing the various crops, both fields and the high tunnel?
So, and I'm realizing that I kind of skipped over one of my CSP grants a little bit, but we have always used, well, except for lime, I don't know, some people don't view lime as an organic, but we've always used organic. So we use fish meal, bone meal, blood meal, langbionite, boron. I don't think I'm missing any. And we've always side dressed with those. We are looking into fertigation. We're looking into, with our tissue samples from last year, doing some foliar sprays. I think those sound like something that would be a little bit more of an instant result for us. And getting the plants what they need kind of right in that moment versus organics. It takes time for those to break down and be absorbed by your plant. Yeah.
Hey, did you find that electric fencing at the moose's nose level did anything?
You know, it's kind of questionable. I feel like I have watched them smell it, and seen them jump a couple times. We do have a pretty decent moose population out that direction. Did it really deter them because it was electrified? Very questionable. It is about 1.5 feet, 2 feet off of the main fence. And so I feel like in some ways it's slightly just another visual deterrent for them. But if their babies get in there in the spring, which seems to be our biggest issue at times, they sneak in different ways, then a mom will just pile over the whole thing. They just don't care. So I don't know if it really matters whether you electrify a fence, you put up, I mean, we've put up flagging and different visual things for them. If they want in, they'll just come in.
And now you've got a question, how tall is the fence and what it made out of? And then I'm also curious what your posts are.
Our posts are just metal, maybe 3-inch posts. And then we used this fencing that it was very hard to do, part of our marital therapy fencing, but it was smaller at the bottom and larger up top, trying to keep out rabbits. Not worth our strain. It stretches at different lengths from the bottom to the top. So when you're trying to make it really pretty and straight, it doesn't work great. So just like a regular square would be totally fine without the smallness at the bottom. The snow covers that up anyways, so it doesn't matter, because then the rabbits are at that bigger square that they can just come in when they want to. But the original fence is 6 feet. We did kind of pull that up a little bit off the ground, maybe 10 inches, somewhere in there. So I would say like the total height of the fence is about 7 or 8 feet. But go as tall as you can.
I'm curious, do you hire labor to help with weeding, or is it just the family?
It's pretty much just the family. Adeline's been a very consistent farm worker. The boys like to do heavier, short-term type tasks. So it works out. We also weed and share type things. So lots of locals like to come pick for us, pick for themselves, weed. It's kind of a joint community effort, but we have yet to truly hire much for outside help.
There's a couple comments. One person says they recommend Alaska Farm Supply moose fencing. That it's a little spendy, but that it works well. A thank you for the wonderful presentation. Another person uses 7.5 foot moose fencing from Alaska Farm Supply, so
Cool.
sounds like that's a hit.
It does sound like that's a good idea.
Cool.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Do you have plans in the future for doing different crops or?
Well, if you remember the aerial view, there's still one field that we have yet to decide upon. So it has irrigation to it. We just haven't bit the bullet. So if anybody has any great ideas, they can throw it in the comments. We love using strawberries, and we never have enough strawberries. We've thought about doing a strawberry field. They're very labor intensive. And I think potentially would have better production doing them in a different manner than putting them in the ground. But
Well, Tiffany, we had a project with Oceanside Farms down here in Homer. And they were building different models of raised beds for strawberries. You don't have to crawl around so much, so your back and your knees don't hurt. And so those designs and blueprints, we're gonna put on our website, but you can reach out to us and we can get you that model, and you can grow things under it. So you could have that as an overstory and ground crops underneath.
that
It'll
sounds
block a
great.
little bit of the sun, but whatever, it's 18 hours in the summertime, right?
Yeah, lots of sun. Sounds good. Do we have any more questions?
I just had one that escaped me. Oh, how many acres do you have in cultivation?
We have just like 2 acres in cultivation of our farm crops, and then the forestry grant does cover that 120 acres of forestry work.
I have a question.
Okay, we got one more here. in
One more
Homer.
question. How many acres do you think the peonies take up? Of the acres you use? Or the total?
Our peonies are just 2 fields that are 70 by 70 feet. We have 1,000 roots, which is pretty small considering.
Yeah, they're beautiful, I know that.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tiffany. Great. I see people clapping. Awesome.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.